Well, is Europe finally waking up and saying enough is enough and turning away from Ukraine? What about Poland specifically? Over the weekend, large protests, part of their Independence Day celebrations, signs saying enough and down with the U.S. Israelization or U.S. Israelization of Poland's foreign policy. Are they saying enough is enough? There's been a number of signs in Poland over the past few weeks against Ukraine and against the foreign policy in Ukraine. So what is going on in Poland? This is quite a shift, it seems to me, or those of us from the outside. Mike Krupa is a journalist, host of Votum TV in Warsaw, Poland, and he joins us now from the getting more cold by the minute up there in Warsaw. Nice to see you as winter is starting to creep in on Poland. Mike, good to see you.
Good to see you. Yeah, we're getting the Hunt for Red October opening scene vibe slowly here in Poland. Not yet snow, but definitely getting cold. Great to be back on the show.
Well, you can buy some of that American natural gas at 50% over the price tag now after we blew up the Nord Stream pipeline. So you have that to look forward to. That's capitalism in action for you.
Well, we're just waiting for that freedom gas, and I hope as we mentioned before the show, the Hans Mollman, the Ukrainian Hans Mollman, who was apparently accused of doing this with a bunch of his teammates on a sailboat. I kind of feel sorry for the guy because the way they're dumping Zelensky right now borders on, on the tragic, but in a way it's also humorous. So we're just waiting for that freedom gas to come and for the money to get into the coffers where they need to be.
The freedom gas, I love that. So let's talk about Poland. Noticing these protests over the weekend, it was pretty startling to see these signs and I might have butchered the phrasing of this, but these signs read, stop the U.S. Israelization of Poland's foreign policy. What does that mean?
Yep, you got that right. Well, what happened was every November 11th on our Independence Day, there's this huge rally in Warsaw, which has been taking place since 2010. It's called the Independence Day March. And it's sort of a gathering of right-wing organizations, nationalists, patriots, and conservatives who basically want to rally that day in favor of Poland independence. So it usually has Eurosceptic. It's got this Eurosceptic line embedded in it since the beginning. But it's very ecumenical in the sense that anybody who considers themselves to be a patriot and against the European Union can attend. So what happened at this year's march was one of the factions that took part, they held these huge banners. One said Pole exit, as in Poland has to exit the European Union. And the other one read, as you mentioned, stop U.S. realization of the Polish raison d'etat, which basically means stop being subservient to Israel and the United States in our foreign policy. Now, that triggered the reaction from the Israeli ambassador in Poland, one Yakov Livni, who wrote on X that, I quote, stop U.S. realization of the Polish raison d'etat, called these patriots on Polish Independence Day in Warsaw. They fight against three evils, the U.S., the EU, and Israel. No words. Well, my comment to that was he forgot about one other evil, which is Ukraine, because we're also fighting against that evil. But yeah, it got him triggered. And it was actually a fairly public statement made by one of the factions of the Confederation Party, which actually enlarged its parliamentary presence during the elections of October the 15th. Yesterday, we had the swearing in of the new parliament in Poland. We had the election of the new Speaker of the House and the vice speakers, or as we call them, marshals in Poland. And the leader of the faction that had those banners during the march is one Grzegorz Braun. He's an MP. And his faction in the Confederation Party was enlarged by 3 more MPs, so I guess he became stronger in Parliament. But yeah, it did get noticed by the international media. Obviously, you had the usual calls of anti-Semitism and so on. But in the current context, in the context of Ukraine, in the context of what's happening in Gaza, I think that was a very prescient banner, and I think we need more of those in Poland.
So I want to drill down on what this means, because I think it's very childish. People throw around anti-Semitism. That means they want to shut down conversation about it. I think people who just throw that term out there, it's the same thing by just yelling out Putin apologist. They don't really know what they're talking about. They probably haven't read a book in the past 6 months in their lives. So I always discount those arguments because it shuts down conversation. But what's really at the heart of this foreign policy debate there? Is it that they're tired of being bullied by Israel and the United States, being told what to do? Obviously, the United States, of course, has multiple, military bases. NATO has set up military bases in Poland, almost like an aircraft carrier, the way that RFK Jr. described Israel to the United States, essentially an aircraft carrier for United States foreign policy. So, can you drill down on that? What does the anger mean? What is for people to go out on the street and to protest? There's got to be something deeper there.
Well, the anger is that, paradoxically, on Independence Day, we are celebrating in a country that is not fully independent when it should be independent, because any form of subservience to a foreign capital or any form of foreign military presence on your soil automatically discounts you as an independent country, by simple definition, by simple logic. You are not dependent if your foreign policy is basically dictated or semi-dictated by people in a different capital or overseas, for example. And I think military presence on your soil, foreign military presence, is the ultimate sign of you not being independent. So I think that's what they were hammering at, that on Independence Day, we want to show that Poland should be independent. We can be partners with everybody. But the fact that our government is so subservient to instructions coming from think tanks or the State Department or the Pentagon, and sometimes in many cases also subservient to the foreign policy priorities of Tel Aviv. Let's not forget that in 2017, there was a huge anti-Iranian conference which took place in Poland. I think it was in January 2017. Mike Pompeo arrived. What's his name? Rudy Giuliani actually made a speech in Warsaw Square where he basically, talked about destroying the so-called Iranian regime. And there were actually representatives of the terrorist organization Mujahideen Khalq present, who were also calling for the abolition of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So there are many cases. America is obviously the big enchilada because, we can consider the Polish Republic to be a satellite state of the United States, unfortunately. But because of that, there are also inroads being made by the Israeli authorities where they also tend to see the Polish authorities, not distinguishing whether they're left wing or right wing, and trying to tell them what to do in terms of internal Polish policy, but also foreign policy, as we saw with regards to Iran.
Also, there was criticism from Poland to the former Polish Western territories in Ukraine and criticism of the Ukrainian government and their handling of those former Polish territories in Western Ukraine. You and I have talked over the past year about what will happen to Western Ukraine once this war is over. Will it be absorbed by Poland once again? What will be left of Ukraine if it continues to throw men and resources against the Russian wall? What will Poland do? So can you explain the criticism? Number one, I think it was around Nazis specifically, but it was about the handling there. But also, what will happen to Western Ukraine in the future here if Zelensky is pushed out?
Well, one of the big problems that we've had with Western Ukraine, or what used to be Poland, basically, is the fact that during the Volhynia massacres, which took place in the early 1940s, 1943 especially, where over 200,000 Poles were murdered by the Ukrainian nationalists and their allies under the tutelage, obviously, of Nazi Germany. A lot of the victims of those crimes have still not been dug up from their graves and exhumated. So because we want to conduct these exhumations as a Polish state, we've been asking for this to the Ukrainian side for some time now. The Ukrainians are refusing to let the Polish inspectors and the archaeologists to go in there and dig those bodies up and give them a proper burial. So that's one of the things that is a sort of a dividing line between Warsaw and Kiev, and that's one of the things that's become very public in recent years, recent months, I would say, because we're sending all this money and equipment to Ukraine, and we're not allowed to properly bury the dead that were murdered as part of the genocide conducted in Volhynia. Now, the question of what becomes of Western Ukraine is still a very open question, because that all depends on who will govern Kiev in the next couple of months, whether that will be Zaluzhny, whether that'll still be Zelensky, or whether that will be somebody who overthrows one and the other and comes to some sort of compromise with the Russians, whereby they will not feel compelled to cross the Dnieper River. But let's say, realistically speaking, that the Russians do not, and I think that's what's going to happen. They're not going to cross the Dnieper. The Kiev regime is going to collapse, and we're going to have a rump state in Western Ukraine. I think we're going to have a situation similar to what we had in Kosovo in the 1990s. So we're going to have a lot of these Azov battalion type guys running around with a lot of guns, a lot of weaponry. They'll be very reminiscent of what we saw in Kosovo with the so-called Kosovo Liberation Army, which was sponsored from top to bottom by the Central Intelligence Agency. And at one point, they were designated a terrorist organization, but when they found out they could be useful against Slobodan Milosevic, they were used, by the deep states of the West against Yugoslavia. So I'm afraid that we might have literally on our borders a chaotic semi-terrorist narco state full of weapons, and that's just going to generate not only refugee problems, which we're already seeing in Poland, but national security problems of the most profound character. So I'm afraid this is going in the right direction, and I'm not so sure if that wall that was built recently on the border with Belarus should not be moved a little bit more south and put on the border with Ukraine.
Now you said I'm afraid this is going in the right direction. Did you mean that, or you meant this is going in the wrong direction?
Maybe I misspoke. I meant that it's going in that direction in the sense that it's going in the direction of Western Ukraine becoming a sort of narco Kosovo terrorist state. Yeah.
Sure. From your mouth to God.
Because I don't see any other option at this point.
No.
Yeah.
And this is what this is what NATO loves to do, right? I mean, there's a long history of trashing countries in this very way and leaving wreckage in its wake. And hopefully this doesn't run up against Poland. And what you guys have to deal with there. So we'll be watching it very, very closely. One of the most astute, one of the smartest guests that we have here on Redacted, Mike Krupa. We appreciate it. I thought some of what you said today was absolutely brilliant. And I think it's very, very important for people to realize, how can you be an independent country when you have foreign countries' military bases in your backyard? What would we do in the United States if China decided to set up shop and have military bases dictating our terms in our own backyard? Unbelievable. Mike, great to see you. As always, thank you so much. Stay warm up there.
Thanks. Have a great one. Take care.
Thank you so much for watching this segment here at Redacted. We are live every day at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, trying to share the stories that the mainstream media will not cover. You should also come over and join our community of Redacted Rebels over at redacted.inc. That's our private locals community where we can share exclusive content that we simply cannot share here on YouTube. Come over and join the rebellion together right now by going to redacted.inc. We'll see you next time.